Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Abby. I am the College Outreach Coordinator and Newsletter Editor at Biodiversity for Livable Climate, and I'm very excited to welcome today Ayushi, who is a member of the Roots and Shoots National Youth Leadership Council. Roots and Shoots is a program of the Jane Goodall Institute. It was started by Dr. Jane Goodall, and it is an organization that works to empower young people to create positive change in their communities. So I'm going to start by reading a short bio for Ayushi, and then we are going to jump into a conversation talking about her project, which centers around creating art and combining that with climate activism. So thank you for joining us, Ayushi. So I'll read your bio really quick. So Ayushi is a high school senior in Memphis, Tennessee. And when she's not in school, she's dancing with Youth Ballet Memphis, playing the piano or the saxophone, and working on her Roots and Shoots projects. She's also very passionate about environmental conservation as well as the creative arts, and she tries to focus her work in the ways these two areas intersect. So thank you, Ayushi, for being here. And would you like to just share a little bit more about Roots and Shoots and what it is and how people can get involved?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. Roots and Shoots is, like Abby said, the youth program of the Jane Goodall Institute. And it's a global movement of youth. So there are chapters in most countries. And it's a place for youth to get empowered to use their voice and take action for the climate, other people, and animals. And it's just, there are resources on there to get you started taking action. And you can also be inspired by other youth leaders. Their projects are all up there. You can join a group on Roots and Shoots to see more change makers like you and work with people, get inspiration from them. It's just a free community all over the world it's just a global movement of youth who are using their voice to make compassionate decisions and also lead change in their communities in the world around them.
Thank you for sharing that. So how did you get involved with Roots and Shoots and then the National Youth Leadership Council?
Like a lot of people, I got involved with Roots and Shoots because of Dr. Jane Goodall. She's one of my biggest inspirations, and what I'm especially inspired by is her method of making change and taking action with empathy. And I really wanted to be a part of that change making. So that's why I joined Roots and Shoots. And then I actually applied for the National Youth Leadership Council after hearing you, Abby, and so many other inspiring youth leaders at the 2020 virtual summit for the NYLC. And I was really excited about this opportunity to interact with people who had such strong impacts on their community. And I knew being able to work with these council members would improve my own impact as well.
That's wonderful. And it's such an incredible experience to be a part of, a community of young people, both on the council and within Roots and Shoots at large. So it's really great to hear that. Can you tell us about your project called ConservACTION and what it's about, how it got started, and where it is today?
Yeah, definitely. So I started ConservACTION project in the summer of 2020. So we were all at home and I was doing a lot of thinking. And I didn't like how my two passions, science and the creative arts, were always separated. And I always had to switch between my science and STEM mode and my dance, art, and music mode. And I didn't really see why there should be that divide, because what I bring to one of these spaces comes from my experience in the other. And especially with an issue like climate change that requires immediate action, we need people in all areas to contribute to solutions. And we'll need creativity if we want to have a chance at preventing the climate crisis from continuing. So also a different thought, I started thinking about inclusivity in climate and how people who do not believe in climate change or people who aren't really interested in climate solutions are usually the people that have not had access to unbiased information about climate science, or at least not accessible information outside of academia. So with all of these thoughts in my mind, I started ConservACTION Project as a way to highlight the intersections between climate science and the creative arts. It's an online space, so it's a website, and also I have an Instagram page for people to showcase their environmentally related artwork, and also a place for people to find accessible resources to take action against climate change.
That's amazing. And I guess a follow-up question to that, is I'm really curious, is do you have a favorite art project or initiative that you or someone else has done through the project?
I've gotten so many submissions over the past, I think it's almost been 2 years. I started it August of 2020. So I've gotten a lot of submissions and they're all so cool. Like I love seeing, whenever I get a submission, I love seeing the inspiration behind the work. Some artwork uses like actual scientific data and kind of expresses that through art. I know I did that with one of my dance pieces. So I'll answer your question in two parts. So I'll say my favorite thing that I've made for ConservACTION and then my favorite submission that I've received. So for me, I'm most passionate about dance as out of all the art forms that I do. And I'd never done a dance that related to climate change. So the first thing I did in that area was a submission for ConservACTION. And I looked at IUCN data for species extinction, and I was inspired by the possibility of a sixth mass extinction for biodiversity loss that was caused by human activity. And I was inspired by that data, and I made a dance that kind of reflects my feelings towards that issue. And also my dancing, I used some editing effects to make it kind of get faster and accelerate throughout the piece, and I used music that was kind of dramatic, and I tried to make the dance really reflect the data that I was looking at. And I really liked that piece because I could see people that wouldn't have connected with the data itself, like just the science, and I could see them connecting with the more emotional aspect of the dance. And I mean, that's another reason I started the project, that art is something that everyone can see, everyone can create, like everyone can be a part of. It's not as exclusive as the more academic side of climate change action. So I really liked seeing the way people interacted with that piece and how they were able to connect with the issue of species extinction in a different way, in a more personal way. But then I'd say my favorite submission that I've received was from Ben Carter, who is an artist in Luxembourg, and he did a piece on a visual art piece relating to deforestation because of the meat and dairy industry, I think specifically beef production. So the cutting down of like the Amazon rainforest for beef production. And it was a burger he drew with like the rainforest as the meat in between. And I just thought that was a really cool concept. And it really illustrated the point he was trying to make. And it's also something, like I was saying with my piece, that somebody could really connect to, like they see that and they really see the dramatic point that he was trying to make with that.
Mm. I think those both sound like really wonderful, I don't know, examples of how art can really impact people. And especially when it comes to talking about an issue like climate change, like you said, sometimes people have a really hard time relating to science or hard data. And so having an art form, whether it be visual art or dance or something like that, having that be a way to help people connect to the issue is both inspiring and important, I think. So thank you for sharing that. So kind of going off of that, one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is, when we're learning about climate change, whether it be through news articles or in school or, any way that you can learn about these issues, it can start to weigh heavily. And so I was wondering how you kind of find motivation and inspiration to keep going forward in your work. And if you ever experience any climate anxiety and how you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when I was younger, like most of my middle school years, I did have a lot of climate anxiety. Like I would get really scared about the thought of climate change and global warming, especially. Like I would be so stressed about the ozone layer all the time. But I feel like now that I have really like advanced my projects and started working against climate change, that has kind of gone away a little bit. So it kind of is a effect that it's not what you would think. It's kind of the opposite of what you would think. But the more I'm consuming information on climate change and the more I'm like working against it, the less scared I feel about it, especially because of all the youth action that I'm seeing. So the main thing that gives me hope was definitely youth action against climate change. And the perfect example of this is the Roots and Shoots NYLC, getting on those check-in calls at night and hearing about everyone's projects is always so inspiring, because you can really see the scope of what young people are doing to combat issues like climate change. And also not only the NYLC, but also my friends at school. Each one of them has something that they're really passionate about. And I always learn so much from them, even if we're not discussing like major world issues. And spending your day with people that care so much about the world around them is really what gives me the most hope, because if we are taking this action as students, our impact will only grow as we enter university or begin working.
That's a great point and super important, especially connecting with other people and finding your community, which I think is also kind of what you're talking about, being a part of a group like the council and having that community to find both hope and inspiration and also support within is super important. So thank you for sharing that. And one question I just wanted to kind of go back to is I'm really curious how you first became interested in environmental issues or biodiversity loss and climate change specifically. What sparked that interest for you?
Yeah, I think that's something that I've actually never thought about. Like, I don't know when it was that I started becoming interested in environmental conservation. I think I've always liked animals and I've always liked learning about animals. And I think from a young age, we would learn about like endangered species and stuff like that in school. And I think that kind of sparked it. Like I was really into all these endangered species, and then I would kind of look into them on my own and then understand later kind of the human impact that is making them endangered. So I guess it's just asking questions, and definitely a lot of my elementary school science classes, like when I was really young, learning about endangered animals, and I always liked animals. So I think it was just sparked from there.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That makes a lot of sense. And also, I think it's okay not to be able to pinpoint like a specific, moment or time when that happened. For me, I know my interest in these issues also was gradual and had a bunch of different events that happened that brought that interest up for me. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I my last question for you is just if there was somebody who's watching this video who wants to start a project similar to yours, or if they're interested in potentially combining art with climate activism, or even if it's not just activism, but just combining those two, like you said, science and art fields, what advice might you have to give to them?
I would say like they go together really well. Like they will go together better than you first think. And it actually feels very natural to include art in your climate action, especially if you are doing activism work. And if you're really trying to connect with people and change minds, especially with people in power, it is it's like art is going to be your tool. So it's going to be something that you don't really need to think about working in. Like it's going to be something that's necessary in your action. And it doesn't have to be art, but having something that's outside of just how you feel about climate, like climate change and climate science, having something besides your emotions. And obviously you're probably really passionate about it, and putting that on somebody who is maybe not wanting to change their perspective, will need like an outside force. And I think art is definitely a really good way to do that. Not just visual art, use all talents that you have. So like my dance, music, art, theater, I know is a great way to like make a good statement. All ways that you can incorporate the things you do outside of your climate action into your climate action will be really helpful and only benefit what you do for climate change in your scientific mode. It only helps to incorporate something that is more relatable to everyone, and it'll help get your message across better.
Mm. Yeah, that's really beautifully put and I think really useful advice. So thank you for sharing that and putting that into words for us. And also thank you for joining us today and for sharing about your projects and also topics like hope and how other people can get involved and talking about roots and shoots as well. I really am excited to have you here and appreciate your time so much. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time doing this interview.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to stop recording.